mean, anyway, all right, let's jump into this. Good evening, Crypt Keepers, and welcome to Cryptique, where we discuss all things paranormal, occult, UFOs, metaphysical, hidden history, forbidden archaeology, and all things truther. And today, we're going to talk about movies, and we're going to talk about some horror movies, but we're going to talk about some other movies too, because that's what we do. I'm joined as always by my boy Ryan. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man.
All right.
I think I wear this shirt a lot. Editing the YouTube videos, I feel like I realized it right before this. I probably wear this shirt too often.
We'll get you.
But I don't have the matching hats and shirts that you have.
It's Temu, buddy.
Oh God.
All right. So real quick, what you guys need to know, please like, subscribe, and share. Socials are in the notes. You can let us know what you think at cryptiquepodcast@gmail.com. You can check out our stuff at cryptiquepodcaststore.com. And if you want to buy us a coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/cryptiquepi. So now, as I alluded to earlier, one of my favorite people in the world, we want to introduce, well, before we do this, you've got some different things out there. How do you want people to know you? Because you've got somewhere it's one name, somewhere it's a different name. I don't want to reveal your secret identity. DC villains would come after you.
Yeah, Patrick Lawrence. Yeah, film editor, Patrick Lawrence. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to read some of your background because I know that you probably wouldn't want to do that. So it's kind of like, when a guest comes on, like when someone sings you happy birthday and you're in your 40s, you're kind of like, it's a little cringy. So allow me to introduce thyself. Patrick Lawrence is a Los Angeles-based professional film editor, originally from right here in St. Louis, Missouri. And Patrick, update me if any of this needs to be changed. So,
you're reading off my bio?
Yeah,
it could be good.
Okay, so since 2014, he's edited 16 feature films, including Scare Me, which is that still just on Shudder?
No, it's available anywhere. Yeah.
Okay, great. I want to talk about that one because I love that movie. And Clara's Ghost, which I wanted to watch, I just didn't have time this afternoon. But they both premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. That's a big deal, right? That's kind of like the World Series of film festivals.
Exactly.
All right. So in addition to having seven films premiere at Sundance, projects that he has edited have screened worldwide at Cannes, SXSW. Am I saying that right, or do I sound
South by Southwest?
South by Southwest.
Yeah.
Okay. Tribeca, Outfest, AFI Fest, and more. So outside of the theatrical, he is an accomplished television editor, recently serving as lead editor on seasons 1 and 2 of Bonding, available on Netflix, as well as the second season of This Close for Sundance TV. And he believes that filmmaking is a collaborative art that succeeds on the backs of those that you surround yourself with. He prides himself on being a passionate collaborator, coworker, and friend who will stop at nothing to make sure your project leaves his care in the best shape possible. And I can vouch for him being a great friend, co-worker, and collaborator, as he was the narrator on a terrible film I made in 2005 that you will never see. But trust me, he did a great job. It's the only redeeming part of the movie. So, all right. So now we went over a little bit, but can you kind of share what some of these awards are, what they're exactly for, and what they mean? Or do you know what? Actually, before that, let's talk about Scare Me. Would you consider that one of your biggest films?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most recognized projects that I've been a part of. And, I've been living out in Los Angeles since 2015, and I've been working as an editor now since 2011. And, a lot of stuff you work on, you give so much time and energy and hours and days and months of your life working on stuff, and then nobody sees it.
Yeah. We know how you feel. Trust us.
So Scare Me is one of those ones where it actually did sort of like break through a little bit, and I think it might have been, it came out in October of 2020, so we were still kind of in quarantine mode.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that necessarily like helped it or hurt it, but like if you had a Shudder subscription at the time, you know, you probably saw it because they promoted it pretty heavily. And for me, coming out of the pandemic, it was sort of a really good calling card to have, because I could take meetings with people and say like, I'm the editor who did
Right.
Scare Me, and they were familiar, and so I was able to really piggyback off of that for a couple of years post pandemic in doing more horror comedies, which previous to the pandemic I'd done a lot of like dark comedies. So if you watched like Bonding on Netflix or This Close and other TV projects I've done, a lot of them were just like strictly just like comedy based. But I had done Clara's Ghost in 2017, 2018, and that was horror comedy. That was sort of like the first real horror comedy that I did. And so that job is actually what got me Scare Me, and then Scare Me just kind of shot me off into that territory.
That's awesome. I haven't seen Scare Me since the day it came out.
Oh yeah.
But one thing that I noticed about it, and like I said, Ryan's a film aficionado, kind of. He had or has a podcast on.
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
All right. So
we're trying to figure out what direction to take it in. It's hard to make a movie review podcast. There are so many out there. You got to have your own sort of niche or personality, and it's hard to be edgy on YouTube anymore.
It is. One thing I wanted to talk about, and this is why I bring up that he's kind of more of a film aficionado than I am, is obviously when I'm watching it, I knew you edited it. So that's what I'm focusing on, right? Like, I'm like, okay, well, he picked this cut here and this cut here. And it just seemed like Scare Me had like 500 cameras, because there were just like every possible angle that you could get. It seems like it's in there. Am I right? Was that difficult?
Yeah, I think so. It didn't have 500 cameras, which is the, it had one camera, and it was made for a very, very modest budget. And and the strengths of Scare Me was that writer and director Josh Rubin, he basically knew what he had available and built around that. So he knew that he could get a cabin in the woods, and he knew that he had a finite amount of money to make this film, and then built it off of the strengths of that. So it's like, if you could get 3, pretty well-known actors, and then get them in one room, and then have the whole thing take place in that one room, like what are the strengths of it? And it's really on the backs of the acting of it. So my approach is always, I'm a minimalist at heart.
Okay.
I try to edit the scene with the least amount of cuts, the least amount of coverage. I like to make sure that you feel like you earn certain shots. And with Scare Me, it was difficult because every take, you could have played the whole thing in a oneer. You could have just let it run, and like that was it. Like you could, and just watch that. Yeah. So when you're trying to make that decision, it's even tougher, because now it's like, okay, well, I got one good performance. Now I got another good performance. Now I got 6 good performances. Right. So it's like trying to decide which one outshines the other. Gotcha. So that was really difficult. And the scene that I love, and I can send you a clip so you can cut it in here if you need to. But the scene that I love from the movie is when they tell the werewolf story. And sort of the behind the scenes of that was that the 2 actors in the scene are Josh Rubin and Aya Cash, and Aya was not on set that day. She was feeling sick. So Josh had to act out the whole scene just from his side of the room.
is tossing. And
So
Just acting like she was there.
acting like she was there.
and it doesn't help that there's like a storm, like a really bad storm. And he looks outside his bedroom window, and he sees this creepy, crawly tree. Kind of like the one in Poltergeist. You know, it's like branches all gnarled, and it's banging against the house, and the wind is like... Anyway, so Sam, he hears this noise downstairs, and it's kind of like a, you know, like a weird animal sound. And just down the hallway, his mom and his dad, they hear it too. And the mom wakes his dad like, sweetheart, did you hear that? I think there's someone in the house. And don't wake me up. I don't know if the dad's like Jewish or the dad's like, well, I guess I'll go check it out. So Dad, he goes downstairs with a flashlight.
Details.
Sam's dad,
And so
whose name is...
every take I looked at, I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. And then he goes up to the balcony and I'm like, this is phenomenal.
He's half dog or whatever. So he starts lurking up the stairs.
He's lumbering up
lumbering
the
up the
stairs.
stairs. Yeah, he starts lumbering up the stairs like
Show me that lumber. Ooh, breathe like a werewolf. Breathe. Holy fuck, that's fucking scary.
See? I can be scary.
Apparently.
So
Anyway.
then when you get the next day's footage and now you've got the coverage of Aya and you're like, okay, now she's, you know, doing it up just as well as he was. And now you're trying to, you know, find the balance to the scene. And yeah, I struggled with it a lot more than any other film I've worked on simply because I didn't know if I got it right. I think sometimes you're working on stuff and you're like, that feels right. I look at the footage. This is the way to do it, you know, and it could always be, you know, malleable and you can change it. But like, that was one where I was like, there's literally 1,000 different ways I could play this scene. And I'm just going to go with the version that I think works the best.
Right on. How much creative freedom do you have? Because I know, and I definitely want to talk about Occults, and I want to talk a little bit about Nothing Still too. But you had a lot of creative control in those projects. How much do you have, you know, as an editor?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I, you know, when I started dabbling and going to film school, I wanted to be a director, and I think a lot of people want to be directors.
Sure.
But I had a hard time sort of feeling like my ideas stood out because when you're surrounded by a lot of highly creative people, they've all got really good ideas, and you know, confidence issues take hold and you start doubting yourself. And so I had all of those things, and I had ended up taking this is actually before I even met you. Like I had ended up taking a video production course because digital filmmaking was just starting to happen. And this would have been around 2003, 2004. And I took this video production course where we were shooting on DV tape. And so we would spend, it was like a 4-hour-long class. So we would take the first 2 hours, go and shoot something around campus, and then come in and edit it for the next 2 hours. And when I realized how I could do that and how I could make certain decisions, I realized that editing was sort of an extension of directing.
Sure.
So if I couldn't succeed as a director, I could be an editor and I could still have sort of influence over whatever the final the final product is. And that really interests me. So yeah, I'll say that like what they don't tell you, I always tell kids that like you can't learn this stuff in a classroom. Like you can learn the basics of like how to use a editing system and you know, codecs and all of that stuff. But like what they don't teach you is collaboration and like egos and being a psychiatrist for the editor, for the director, and all of these things that like I never knew going into this either. I was just like, oh, this is fun. I could be, I could have all this influence. And no. But like they don't tell you what to do when you're like sitting in the room with the director behind you and they're like losing their mind over something. And so I would say that, like, to get back to your question about creative influence, I definitely have a lot, because the way that I approach an edit is I come in and I do my version first. So like right now I'm working on this film right now, and like what they just finished shooting a week and a half ago or something. And I come in and I just start editing the scenes and seeing like what feels right, what I'm vibing with. And then I walk away from it. And then eventually I'll go back and I'll start assembling it all together, and like I'll create the editor's cut. But I do all of this before the director's even seen the movie. And the reason I do that is because the worst thing in the world would be for me to sit here with the director over my shoulder, like hemming and hawing over every single take. So somebody's got to do that work first, because otherwise it's never getting done. You just lose your mind. Because you get in a room with directors and they are they're bothered by something that happened on set, or oh, this person in the background's wearing the wrong color shirt, or we saw them in the previous shot. No. It's like, who gives a shit? Excuse my language. Like, no,
you can say whatever you want.
So it's like somebody has to go in and do all of that finessing and all of that think work before you get in the room and they start having these like they're sort of melting from their insecurities, so that is sort of where my influence begins. And then what I try to do, and this is a battle, but like what I try to do is when I get into the director's cut, I let them sort of come in and start pushing their weight around. And I have to be willing to kill my own darlings, because there's things that I've done that I think are really good, but like arguably when you start getting, outside eyes and ears on things, that you start realizing like, oh no, that is a better idea. We should try that. So it's a real struggle, but you do want to kind of see like where the road goes. And more often than not, you go down a path and then, a week, 2 weeks, a month later, they're like, they either go, I want to go back to the way you had it, or they go, oh, what if we did it like this? And you're like, the way I did it?
Redo everything.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I would say that my creative influence on a film, it is me, right? Like when I watch a finished film, any editor would probably tell you this, is like they make that film. I think that cinematographers, writers, actors, directors, it's like those are all the things that like are necessary to make a film work. And we each sort of have authorship over that. But I would say even more so with editors, it's like we physically make the movie. So
and the editing often determines the feel of it and the pacing and all that. And I personally feel like, especially with lower budget productions, the editing makes or breaks it. I mean, one of our favorite movies that I did with my other buddy on our other podcast was Hawk and Rev Vampire Slayers, which was on Amazon Prime. It's a low budget thing, and the editing is perfect. I mean, there's no joke that they hold on to for too long. There's no shot that lingers too long. Whoever did it just perfectly balanced each scene to make it look awkward, kind of low budget, a little hokey, a little campy, but to show you that they're in on it. Like they understand what they're doing. They're in on the joke. They know that it's a goofy, it's almost like a Lost Boys, but they're in on the parts that are unintentionally hilarious. And I just feel like a lot of that comes down to the editor, like you said, like having a vibe of what they feel like is going to work well, how long to stay with something. Just, I mean, like you said, the cinematographer has their framing, actors have everybody has their part, but the editor if the editor does poorly, there's no way to cover that up. There's no way to recover from a badly cut movie or badly timed scenes.
Well, I would go deeper than that and say that, you could polish a turd, right? But there's only so much that you can do if a script is bad and if the acting is bad. Like,
True.
I think there's a couple of things that I've worked on that I've definitely made watchable, but that doesn't necessarily mean I made a good movie out of it. But I did the best that I could, those flaws do, shine through like they do, But a lot of times, what I was going to say about that was that we tend, I think some of the weight of like a flaw being on the edit isn't necessarily always on the edit. It's a lot of times it's the decisions that the directors make that you just can't argue your way out of. And you just have to succumb to it and say like, okay, fine, we're going to do that because your name is first. Mine is not. So it's like, if you're making a terrible decision and you don't want to hear me out on why it's a terrible decision, you're the one that's got to answer for it. But
it sounds like when I'm dealing with my kids. Well, hey, if you want to do that, go ahead. But you want to pick up that hot pan, your hand's going to burn. And of course I wouldn't let my kid do that. But yeah, sometimes you have to be like, all right, dude, it's on you then.
Yeah. So you might look at a situation. I think there's an interesting conversation that's going on right now about the movie Madam Web, because I think people are just kind of universally saying it's the worst movie of all time. And there's a lot of blame being put on the writers and the director, and what they're not taking into consideration is the influence from the studio and all of the changes that were made in the edit that was put upon the editor. And so all of those things, I think, nobody ever sets out to make a bad movie. Right. Everybody wants to make the best movie possible, but it's just whatever the circumstances are that eventually like take over and the thing happens.
Well, and with Madam Web, if I understand it right, it's a Sony movie.
Mm-hmm.
So technically is not supposed to tie into or lead up to Tom Holland Spider-Man. And what I saw in some of the interviews made it seem like it's not even related to Venom or any of the other Sony projects that they've done. So yeah, like you're saying, that's kind of a studio thing. That's restrictions based on laws, on intellectual property, or even just we don't want to necessarily tie this into something else. So we have the freedom to maybe just kind of push that aside later if it doesn't do terribly well.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking about low budget movies, I feel like a big pitfall I see is that the person who makes it, they write it, they direct it. People like Chris Stuckman, who started out doing YouTube and then they get into directing themselves. The guys who used to do the Totally Rad Show on Revision 3 and YouTube, Dan Trachtenberg, moved into directing as well. But some of these guys, for their first projects, they kind of try to do everything, including the editing.
Did you know that I edited Chris Stuckman's movie?
No, I had no idea.
I did. I am the editor on Shelby Oaks. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then he's not trying to do it all by himself. So
no. He gave me a ton of freedom on that film. No, Chris is great. Chris is fantastic, and I think he's going to be a very, very successful director, especially once this movie comes out and people see it. I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see it. So, not that I would ask for an advance copy or anything.
No, I can't. I cannot share.
Oh, that'll get you kicked out of Hollywood for sure, right? Oh man, that'll be the worst thing ever. So do you think that others in Hollywood, and we talk about Hollywood as Hollywood, we don't really know what goes on there. Just the average, Midwesterner has no idea. Is there like editors where you're like, boom, I know who did that. You don't have to read the credits, and are you kind of developing a style like that where people might be able to say, well, I know who did that. Yeah, that turned out great. Let's get him.
I would like to think so, but I think it is kind of difficult because there are certain editors that you might see and you go, oh, that looks like something that this person would do. Mm-hmm. Tom Cross is somebody that I think about a lot, who did Whiplash, and La La Land, and he's moved on to do sort of bigger projects like the last Bond movie, and but he has a style of editing that's like I see it and I know exactly who that is. But I think that like a lot of the crafts in filmmaking, even in cinematography, it's like it's hard to when you see good editing, and you can tell when you see bad editing.
Boom.
But it's like being an efficient editor, I think, is maybe like less noticeable, just because it's like, oh, that's just good editing, so but yeah, if you have a certain kind of style to it, I think, I would think that like what's his the guy that edited Everything Everywhere All at Once, I think he's got a very specific style of editing because of who he works with the Daniels. So I'd be interested to see like the next movie he does, like if that director or producer is leaning on him to be more like that. So
gotcha. And I guess it makes, if Patrick was to do 8 horror comedies in a row, you might be able to pick up on a style, but I assume it's different styles for different styles of, TV or movie too.
Yeah, I don't think like I can't do scare me on every movie. I could, and I think that like it just has to be, everything has a certain tone, and so you have to adapt to that. And then a lot of times directors, they come in and they have specific references. So my job is to do a tiny bit of research and then try to, bend myself to that, try to figure out, because they want a specific thing. If they're like, oh, I saw the thing in this movie, I want to do it like that. It's like, oh, okay, cool. And so you go and you watch that and you try to figure out like, okay, how did they do that? Okay, that's how they did it. And then you try to apply it to your edit.
That sounds difficult.
Get it as close as you can. I mean, it is and it isn't. I think that when I started working professionally, not just in college, but like one of the things I figured out right away was that all of the things that you want to do in an edit, you've seen on screen. You've got it in your mind. So it's just figuring out how to get it from here to your fingers. And like once you've got that muscle memory, then you're like, oh, that's how they did it. Okay, great. And now I'm going to do that a few more times. And then, so all of those things, there's still stuff now that I'm, I'll see something and I'll go, oh, where did I see that before? Or if I'm in an edit and I'm like, I want it to do this. I don't know exactly what that is, but I feel like I want to do like this. And then once you start playing with it and start messing with the timing and everything, then all of a sudden you go, that's it. That's how I do it. So.
Cool. How much would you charge to edit a podcast?
Well, times are tough right now in LA. You don't know.
Well, you know what? That's something I wanted to get to you. But for right now, you mentioned you don't notice necessarily good or even great editing as just a random, moviegoer, but you do notice bad editing. And it's funny that you brought up about the person wearing the yellow shirt in the background, because my pet peeve with movies is, say you're watching something like The Walking Dead, because everybody's seen that. They've been living, basically out in the woods for 10 years, but then somebody's wearing a shirt and you can still see like the fold marks in it. Like it just came right off the shelf at Target and they threw it on. And I'm like, and I don't know why, but that really bugs me. I'm like, no, it's got to look like it's been out there for 10 years in the elements and stuff like that. So it is something I look at. Maybe I shouldn't pay so much attention.
Well, it's like when you see behind the curtain, then it's like, too much. But no, the great thing is that we have tools available now, even with all the AI stuff that's going on, that we can change things that in the past we would be screwed, right? Like something like that, you would just say like, okay, well, the costumer messed up. They didn't iron out that shirt. They didn't age it. So it is what it is. But now, we can use, visual effects and AI tech to basically go in and not only, you could change, a shirt, or you can. This movie I did in the fall. There was a like a tent, like a pop-up tent, and it was like super wrinkly. They didn't steam it out, and the director was really bothered by it. So we sent it to visual effects and had them iron it out. And so there's like no wrinkles in the thing anymore. So you could do that, you could just straight up erase people from a shot now. Like all of these things are, that like you would have to go do a reshoot or, spend tens of $1,000s on visual effects. It's like, you can do these things now very easy.
You came at the right time, man, because if it's tedious to do digital editing, I could not imagine sitting there and cutting tape and trying to match it back up together and then being like, no, I don't like that. And you're like, damn, it took me 8 hours to make this 1 minute scene, and now I've got to tear it all apart. That's no fun.
Yeah, I kind of came in like, I learned a little bit of linear film editing when I went to school. But then, non-linear digital editing, was taking off at the same time. So I knew enough about the one thing to then apply it to the other. Gotcha. And yeah, I'm the same way. There's this really great book written by Paul Hirsch, who edited Star Wars. And I listen to his stories and I'm like, a lot of these things apply to me now. But you're talking about, a guy sitting in a room, like with a foot pedal that's running the reels, and then he's got to look at it through a scope and then find the thing and mark it and then make a cut, set it aside, go and find the next cut point, mark it, cut it, go get the other thing, merge them together, put a piece of tape down, and then move on. It's like, and me, I'm sitting here, I'm doing that in like seconds.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you had mentioned things being tough in Hollywood right now. And there's something that I wanted you to kind of explain to us, because I think when people hear, oh, Hollywood's going on strike, people immediately get mad. That's their reaction for the most part. Whoa, what the fuck now? That Tom Cruise, it's not 50 million a movie is not enough. But that's not what the strike is for. No. The strike is for like a key dolly grip that has to deliver pizzas because he can't make enough money to live working 10-hour days in Hollywood. And also, what the hell is a key dolly grip?
All right, it's a two-parter. Let me start with the first one. That's a great question, because while the strikes were going on, I spoke to a lot of people either back home or family members that like didn't understand, or like maybe they had heard something on television. And and you're exactly right that like there's this, misinformation or this idea that like Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman and all these people are going to be like out on the line striking. It's like, no, that's not true at all. It's like the people, the actors, we're out there you're talking about your background actors, your day players, like supporting actors, like people that like when you're watching a TV show, you're like, oh, there's that guy. I noticed him from that thing. Those are the people that are no longer making a living doing this. And why that is because, I love that I'm having this conversation with you, because usually when I tell this story, nobody understands it from my perspective, and you can, because you were there firsthand. But I tell people that media, it goes around in circles. Okay. And we were there in the 2000s working in a record store when you started to see like, they're going, oh, nobody's buying physical media anymore. They're buying digital. So what are we going to do? And maybe you remember this, but there was a Christmas, where they were like, I know what it is. We're going to put out albums on gift cards. And you come in. Do you remember this? I don't remember that. It was called like Music Pass or something. And they sent it to us in boxes. And it was like the new Mariah Carey album and like a stack of like gift cards. Like you would buy. That
must have been after I got fired.
No. It was like you would with like iTunes gift cards, right? And you would come in and it was ridiculous, because who's going to come into a record store to buy a record and go, oh, I probably got a gift card sitting here somewhere. It's like, I guess I'll just buy this, Blink 182 gift card or whatever,
Yeah.
And so they overcorrected, and then time goes by. The next thing you know, it's like now vinyl's back.
Yeah.
And now, so people are buying vinyl again, and people are starting to get gassed up about cassettes. And then I've even heard rumbling that like CDs are starting to become more popular again. So it just goes around in circles. And the same thing happens in the movie industry. It just took 10 years longer, 10, 15 years longer for it to happen. So when Netflix went fully digital instead of, they created the first, streaming shows being like Orange is the New Black, and Hollywood was not prepared for this. So they've got all these contracts, and the contracts are built on studio system. So all of a sudden you start having this internet streamer make TV shows. How do we adjust for that? Because they're not a network. They're streaming on the internet. So what do they? So they had this contract called a new media contract. And new media basically covers anything that's made for online.
Okay.
So it could be a YouTube video, and as long as it's somewhere in it's streaming, that kind of considered this. And so this contract is extremely low budget. It's not the same thing as what you would make if you were working for like ABC or NBC, CBS, all those things.
Yeah.
So as the need for streaming services kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, they were like, okay, they were like, we're just going to put everything under this new media contract. And television, I think I'm kind of like going around in circles here, but it's like television was based on commercials and making money off of those advertisements. And then you would take that money, and then as the shows went into on cable and syndication, the actors would receive points from the royalties, residuals, all those things, right? So
that's one of the arguments that I heard with this strike was some of these folks who were writing for Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever were talking about getting $200, $300 on residual checks after the job was over.
Yeah,
like, I only had a guaranteed job for a year or whatever, and now this is all I have left.
So the actors would make a living off of that. They could pay their bills from their residuals, especially if you were on a show like Friends and it went into syndication forever.
Right.
It's like you could live off of that money. So now with these new media contracts, they're treating everything like it's a YouTube video, and the streamers like Netflix being number one. They were like, we don't have to report any of these numbers to you because we don't have any like Nielsen ratings. Like we don't have any numbers that we have to report to advertisers because we don't have advertisers. So nobody knew how many people are actually watching a show and what those numbers are.
They had to know though. I mean, Netflix had to know.
They knew, but they don't have to share it.
They don't have to tell anybody. Okay. So they could say that like this show right here is the number one show in the country, but who knows what it actually is. And so using, Orange is the New Black as an example, it was like the hottest show in TV for like 3 or 4 seasons. And those actors came out and they were like, here's my residual check. It's like 90 cents for a show, And
it's a slap in the face.
Yeah. So that was the big argument, was that like all of these actors and stuff that used to make a living off their residuals were not making money anymore. And so the reason for the strikes was to restructure this idea, because we had this huge boom coming out of COVID where we need like content. Because prior to COVID, you had Netflix, but then right before it, you had Disney Plus came out, then like Peacock, then Apple TV Plus, Paramount Plus, and they were all like, we need stuff, make everything. You got a script, we're gonna make it, like whatever. Right. And so a lot of stuff got made in the last 3 years, and then they were like, what they realized was, oh, hold on a second, this subscription model doesn't work at all. because a finite amount of people are subscribing to a service. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
it's like you've got Netflix. I'm sure Ryan's got Netflix. I've got Netflix. Who else needs Netflix? It's not like it's going to keep growing, you know?
Right. Right.
So, you know, all of the streamers started running into that, and they were realizing like, oh no, this isn't sustainable because there's no more money coming in. So what are they doing now? Putting advertisements back in. So that's how it goes back in a circle. So just like the music industry, here we are again. We're going to put advertisements back into streaming shows so that we can make money. And then, you know, they're telling people like, well, you don't want advertisements? That's great. You could pay $5 or $6 more a month to have that. And the issue that we're having right now, right this second, is that the strikes ended. The actors got their deal. The writers got their deal. My union, IATSE, is probably going to go on strike this year for the exact same reason. And what's going on is that there's no money. There's no money. They're basically, all the streamers are like holding on to their cash and being very picky about what gets made right now. They're not spending money willy-nilly like they were 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So now everybody is sitting around just going like, well, where's all the work? Like, the strikes are over. Like, why isn't production getting back up and running? And it's tough. And it's driven a lot of people, not only out of Los Angeles, but like out of the industry, and having to find other work. And, you know, I've been really blessed. I've been lucky that I've stayed busy and I've pivoted when I've needed to pivot. But, you know, I'm also hopelessly, you know, wishing that that things go back to the way they were, you know, prior to the pandemic, because things were great.
Yeah, I don't, you know, when you talk about actors like Tom Cruise and stuff, he's fine. He's going to be fine. His great grandkids are going to be fine.
Right.
But it is, you know, it would be like me doing my job because I like my job, doing a good job at it, and then still having to work another job that I hate because I can't make ends meet. And I hate seeing like the Netflix guys like just rolling in money, and then like you said, people being like, oh, well, they made that money on my back, and here's my 90-cent check. And people, I just wanted to get that out because I do think for the most part, people think like, oh, these spoiled rich actors are going on strike because they want more money. And it's important, you know, to kind of understand how it really works. So thanks for sharing that with us. I know nobody really likes to hear, you know, talk about a strike or whatever, but it's important. So, all right, well, let's see here. What is your most underrated horror movie of all time?
Oh my God. Underrated horror film. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Brian, you got one you want to share while he's thinking?
I got to think for a second.
It's a hard one. I knew it would be a curveball, but
I would say, like the first 2/3, well, maybe even 3/4 of the 1999 House on Haunted Hill.
Mm-hmm.
That movie was, I think it was 99. It's one where they, God, I hope I'm thinking of the right one. It's got Jeffrey Rush in it. It's Jeffrey Rush's birthday. He's this rich guy. He's, you know, everybody's going to, it's his wife's birthday. They're going to stay in this mansion. But it was previously owned by this doctor who conducted these bizarre experiments. And some of the stuff they do in it is so creepy. And maybe it's because I was, you know, younger when I watched it. But there's a scene where one of the girls is walking around with like probably not even a mini DV camera. It's probably like the mini VHS or something. And they walk into this empty room, and through the camera, she's seeing a guy like strapped down and struggling on an operating table while the doctor's about to go to work. And then she pulls it down and it's an empty room, and pulls it back up and it's the scene's there again. And it's like so good. And then it just turns into a Goosebumps story at the end. It's terrible. Like the monster just pops out and is chasing them around. It's like, man, just they had the walk it in ending. Just redo it. Redo the end. Find a satisfying way to do that.
They will eventually.
Yeah, I mean, it was. They just had a bunch of these like.
So.
They had a lot of suspense and a lot of like these little moments that were great, and I guess they just couldn't find a satisfying conclusion. So it's just we have to race to get out and make it, and then we win the prize because there's like a $10 million prize for staying there all night.
Yeah, I can tell you that in terms of like underrated horror, I think that there's a lot of really good stuff on Shudder. And one that I think you would like if you haven't seen it is called Deadstream, because I think it probably touches home with some of the stuff you used to do, and it's about a guy that is essentially shooting like a TikTok or a YouTube like live stream. And he decides to go into a supposed haunted house, and he sets up all these cameras throughout the house to capture it all.
Sure.
And then shit hits the fan, and it's all told through the cameras in the house. So it's like whatever he's shooting on, his GoPro or like the surveillance cameras that he sets up. So it none of it ever like pops out and it's like a movie. It's all told through like the cameras that he sets up. That's a great one. And then there's there's one that I did called Who Invited Them. That's really good. It's a home invasion story that basically preys on millennials who have parties and are afraid about who shows up uninvited to their house.
It's me.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff that like doesn't get a lot of attention, but is worth checking out on Shudder.
Yeah.
I started watching
great service. So I mean, you can find, and that's something I was going to bring up too on Shudder. You can find all those weird, crazy, obscure horror movies that you're looking for. And I know there's people out there that are strictly like campy horror movie fans, and you can find so much on Shudder for just a couple bucks a month. It's cheap and has good content. So
yeah, I don't remember which service it's on, but one of the movies I really enjoyed in the last year or two was Willy's Wonderland.
Oh yeah,
with Nicolas Cage. Like I don't know if it's exactly a horror movie, but it's just super good. It's I don't even want to spoil anything from it. Nicolas Cage is never afraid in the movie, but everybody else is. It falls like kind of a teen horror movie setup, but it's another one of those movies where the filmmaker's aware of the joke the whole time, and that's the purpose of it. And it was fantastic. And some of that stuff I never would have found without some of these streaming services putting this stuff up there. So I guess there is some good to that some of the smaller movies can get out there, or lower budget or stuff where they're maybe not going to risk a theatrical release.
Yeah. So you're talking about Nicolas Cage Ford Coppola, right?
Yeah. Nicolas Cage Ford Coppola.
So for my movies, one of them you guys have probably seen. I don't know that it's underrated because I think it got high ranks on Popcorn and Rotten Tomatoes, but Hush, I think, is the name of the movie. I believe it's on Netflix, and it's a deaf lady at a cabin, and she is being, like kind of cut off from her neighbors and being kind of singled out to be, I guess, eventually murdered. But, she has to find ways to tell when people are trying to get in her house because she can't hear. So that's a good one. And then two that, maybe are a little bit more popular. I thought 13 Ghosts was really good. I didn't think it was a scary movie, really, but I thought it was cool, and I liked the images of the ghosts. I thought that was pretty cool. And then Darkness Falls, I think, is fantastic. And that's, I think, 1999, too. It's about this lady who's called the Tooth Fairy, who comes and collects children's teeth, but if you see her, she kills you. But this guy, like, she cannot go in the light at all. It has to be dark. So this guy who's been trying to be killed by her for 20 years, he carries flashlights around with him and all this stuff. Good movie. So check that out after you watch all of Patrick's stuff.
I kind of wonder what you think, Patrick, about two things, if we can continue on the movie stuff before we get to whatever else you want to talk about, Jay. One, do you think that there's an over-reliance on editing and post-production? Because I have heard that it's almost like a meme at this point to just be like, we'll fix it in post. And that a lot of the flop busters that we've seen are kind of because of, I guess, filmmaking teams going in without a really solid plan or a well thought out roadmap for how a movie's going to go. And they just hope that when everything gets into editing, they'll be able to cut together the right scenes or the right takes or the right improvised moments to make everything flow. And that some of these ballooned budgets are because of over reliance on editing and visual effects to fix mistakes that maybe should have been caught and reshot in the moment.
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I say yes because technology is changing and making things easier to do. Like I mentioned before, like I think that now if you're on set and you can't accomplish something in camera, it can be done, sometimes for a fraction of the amount of money than it would be to if you had done it, on set. And so I think that is a crutch that, it's fascinating for me because if I'm in the edit and I'm like, well, great, I don't have this thing, I can't do it, or we don't have this performance, or we don't have the shirt is not, aged, I can make changes like that, and just be like, okay, cool. But does that mean like, hey, let's get Henry Cavill in here with a mustache that he can't shave off and we'll just fix it later? Like, I don't think so. I don't think that's a great idea. Yeah. And I say no, because I work a lot in, indie features, and we don't tend to have those kinds of budgets where like we could just go fix something. Whereas like something like a Justice League or The Flash or some other just chaotic, big budget movie that came out, could easily just be like, here you go. Here's, $500,000, go get that thing that you need, or more.
Yeah.
Here's $5 million, go get that thing you need. So yeah, it is definitely a little bit of both.
Okay.
What
and then
did
the
you?
other question?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, it wasn't. It was. I did ask for two. Do you think Pluto's going to end up winning the streaming wars?
Pluto?
I love Pluto.
I saw a YouTuber kind of saying, Pluto's been the one that's been free and ad supported the whole time, and that's kind of the way a lot of these other ones are going, a reduced monthly cost and ads on top of it. And Pluto's got some decent stuff. There are some, indie movies that I've discovered on there just because every once in a while I'll turn it on for background noise.
There's a whole Kosh channel.
I think that possibly Pluto, but I've also heard, I think Tubi, is another one where it's like they are purchasing movies, independent movies, and like paying pretty well for them. That filmmakers are able to kind of make their money back off of making deals with Tubi. So I do think that there's a business model there that is working for them, and they should keep doing that. I do, from my perspective, and I've been telling people these horror stories now for over a year, and I kind of seem to be right. So maybe I'll be right about this. But I do think that like we're going to get into a world where like there might still be a Netflix if they can hang on. They're having a lot of issues though. But I think what you will see happen is Apple TV will continue to succeed, and Amazon Prime Video will also continue to succeed because they are two networks that have, other forms of income.
Right.
Yeah.
So Amazon can continue to, buy scripts, make things, put movies out. I forget what they just had. They just had something where it's like they put it out in theaters for like 2 weeks, and like now it's coming out on the streamer. So I think you'll see those. Probably Peacock will be fine. I think there's already talks that Paramount might be getting bought out. So it's like,
I think there talk about it getting merged with Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers, yeah. So
Discovery.
and Warner Brothers owns HBO. So I think that like things are going to change in a not so great way in the next, I would say, by the end of this decade. And like I said about Netflix, it's like Netflix will survive if they do the right thing, but like it is just sort of, you kind of see them sort of like deteriorating. But I think that like all of these, the streaming boom that we had 3 years ago is already falling apart. And so I think that it'll be much different in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people talking about. I mean, just a side note, no question here, but I feel like a lot of people are talking about piracy again. Because I knew a lot of people 15, 20 years ago that would say if there was a legal way for me to get this stuff, I would absolutely do it. But I can't, so I have to pirate it. And then a lot of things were available in a pretty convenient way. But I watched this video where this kid was talking about I have whatever it was, like 40 movies on DVD on that shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to subscribe to 5 different streaming services to get access to those. And
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that again, in circles, like physical media is coming back just in the same way it did with music. Vinyl's coming back. Like people are starting to realize that it's like if you have your DVD collections and you got rid of, it's like, we used to sell box sets of like Seinfeld, and I'm like, why do I need these? I can literally watch Seinfeld on 3 different streamers right now.
Yeah.
But it's like if tomorrow they decide, I think this happened with Friends, where they were like, we're going to take Friends off of Netflix and put it on HBO. So now it's like, okay, well, I don't have my Friends DVDs. I can't watch it on Netflix. Now I got to go buy an HBO subscription to watch it. Yeah. So, and then people have also been talking about how movies that they've purchased digitally just being gone one day. And you're like, I paid for that. Why don't I own that? And so I think there's going to be a real drive back to physical media, but it's funny because at the exact same moment, you've got like Best Buy saying we're done with physical media.
Yeah. Best Buy is getting rid of Blu-rays, and Walmart and Target are selling vinyl records again.
Uh-huh.
Sam Goody reunion, baby.
Exactly. So I think it's, I'm probably not far off about this, but like Best Buy is going to make this decision, and then they're going to be like, fuck, go back. And within a couple of years, you're going to start seeing physical media again. Because just like with vinyl, because if you don't know the story about vinyl records, like there were literally down to like 2 record plants in all of America that made vinyl records still. And then all of a sudden this huge boom happened, and you had Taylor Swift and Adele, and they were like, we want 100,000 copies of my record on vinyl or whatever. And they had these 2 record plants in America basically churning them out that nobody else could get records made. And that's where there was a huge stopgap that basically kept the vinyl record industry backlogged for 13 months. And so you had people like Jack White who were stepping up and saying, like, I think Jack White and Metallica started their own record plants, and they called out the record labels and saying, you have the money to fix this. Start opening up record plants again.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, one. How much time do you have, Patrick? Do you need to go soon?
No, as long as you want. Okay.
Cool. So I wanted to ask. Now I know one of your favorite actors, Jared Leto, and
of all time,
is he still, or is that just somebody that you liked back in the day? You like some of his early movies? Because I think Patrick or Ryan and I, talked about Morbius, or was it Mobius?
Morbius, yeah.
And it just, I'm like, okay, man, this guy is a great actor. And
I just got an email from 30 Seconds to Mars. Like,
really?
Literally.
That's awesome.
Said that.
But it's like when they show the whatever he turns into, the vampire or whatever, and he's jumping around, and I'm just like, man, that really looks like somebody could do that in just a cheap home editing studio. And I feel like if you're going to make a movie with a big time actor, and it seems like the movie had a big budget, I just feel like they didn't spend any of it on effects. What did you think about that movie?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Probably a wise decision.
I didn't see it. I'll probably never see it. Yeah. No, Jared Leto, I think really fell off after he won his Academy Award, which I had predicted too. When I saw that movie, The Dallas Buyers Club, I was like, he's getting an Oscar for this, and he did. but he just has not really recovered since.
Yeah.
Well, he's
I
done
think
a
he-
lot of really weird stuff. Like he did Mr. Nobody, and then he did Morbius, and he was the Joker. It's like he's just trying all kinds of different things now.
Yeah, I think he's very, very capable of being very good at what he does.
Again.
I also think that he tries way too tough or way too hard. Like I think he's just
Well, I think he's probably, I mean, now you're still a regular dude, but if you're an actor and, you've got millions of dollars in the bank, people, paying you to endorse Subway and women throwing themselves at you and drugs whenever you want, you never know how it's going to affect somebody either. And we see that a lot in Hollywood where people have a dark turn. I saw a picture of Emilio with Corey Feldman,
yeah.
and that I was just like, yeah, that's the perfect example. So,
Yeah,
all right,
Corey Haim and Corey Feldman are the perfect examples of how things can go wrong.
yeah, and who knows what kind of trauma they may have gone through as kids. Macaulay Culkin had a rough time and stuff. But in any case, is there a director or a particular actor or just somebody that you are dying to work with?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think there are a few people that definitely you see and you're like, oh, I just saw the movie Lisa Frankenstein, which was directed
Haven't seen
by Zelda Williams, Robin Williams' daughter.
Okay.
And this movie had everything I've loved. I mean, since I was a kid, and I loved early Tim Burton stuff.
Mhm.
And I mean early Tim Burton. It had that vibe to it. I feel like if enough people see this movie, it's a cult classic, slam dunk. Really charming, fun production design, great script, and so that's the kind of thing that when I see a movie like that, I'm like, I want to work on that.
Gotcha.
You mentioned Hush, which was directed by Mike Flanagan. I got to work with Mike Flanagan a little bit on a project, but he's a guy that if you've ever seen Midnight Mass on Netflix,
Yeah.
that's a perfect
Mhm.
TV show.
Mhm.
He's fantastic and very smart, and I think could be a savior for the film industry.
Great.
And then and then yeah, there's just other, I think I don't know. It's hard because a lot of times accomplished directors, they have their people.
Gotcha.
I've gotten by working with a lot of new directors. Very few directors that I've worked with get another shot or get to make another movie, and so. But usually, I've been lucky to work with those people several times. But when there are people that I'm like, oh, I'd love to work with them. I want to go hunt them down and try to get them. It's tough because they've got the people that they like working with, and so it's
Sure.
hard to be like, hey, you don't want to work with that person anymore. You want to work with me? And they're like,
Yeah.
well, what do you got?
Sure.
So it's tough, but I more so see projects that I like, and
Gotcha.
I'm like, that's something I want to work on, and I consider myself super versatile. I don't just do horror,
Oh yeah, yeah.
but
Absolutely.
I could do drama and comedy and things of that sort. So there are projects that I stuff like The Boys on Amazon is a great show that's I watched that and I'm like, or What We Do in the Shadows. I think What We Do in the Shadows for me is a dream project, and unfortunately they're shooting their last season right now, so I will not get a chance to work on that show, but
Well,
it's stuff like that.
that's cool. Do you so one of the things that I've kind of noticed, and I feel like I keep going back to Walking Dead, but uh, how is it different when you're editing a TV show as opposed to a movie? I mean, I would assume that a movie, they probably have a soft date that it has to be finished and then a hard date. But I feel like if you're at least back in the day, I know that everything's binge watch now, but when they used to, they would they would film a season and then release it week by week. Is it something where they, on TV shows, it's just madness? Like you have to just work 15-hour days to get everything done because there's another, 8-hour episode or 1-hour episode being shot in 2 days. Like people don't realize like a movie's an hour and a half, but these shows are 40-45 minutes. So that's a half a movie, but you get, 16 of them in a season. So it's a ton of work.
Yeah, a lot of the TV projects that I've worked on, they don't have they have like hard deadlines, but they're not like air dates kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So it's like you might have like, okay, the project's got to be wrapped up by like May 1st, and then you do that, and then it doesn't come out until December or something like that.
Sure.
So there's those things, but like even like right now, because of the strikes, there were a lot of shows that went back into production like in November, and you're going to start seeing them roll out kind of right around now. I think like Abbott Elementary just came back, and like those are the types of things that you're describing where they're in there and they're like, okay, this one's done, start on the next one. Okay, type of stuff that I've worked on that shoots a lot like a feature does, where you kind of shoot your scenes based on a location. So it's like if you've got a show and there are 3 episodes that take place at this one house, they shoot all of that stuff in a row, and then when it comes to you, it you can see it's like, this is episode 101 scene 5, this is episode 103 scene 7, this is episode 108, and then it's set up. You have sort of like different projects and stuff. So it's like if I'm working on episode 1, all of that footage for that episode is in this one project that I'm working on. And then like all the footage for episode 5 is over here. And
Gotcha.
so usually have an assistant editor that goes in and like helps sort of like spread that around and get it in the right place and get it organized.
That makes sense. Man, that would just suck though. Like as someone who, has basically been editing podcasts, like I want to do it all immediately. Like we do a show and I'm like, oh, I want this ready to go immediately. So that would be like frustrating for me, I think. But
to sit around and wait. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking about Shelby Oaks, Chris Stuckman's movie, and I essentially finished the edit of that a year ago, and then we had a couple reshoots and some VFX work, and then we were doing sound mix. We went to Toronto and we did sound mix, and the strikes were going on, so we couldn't get the actors to finish their ADR for the sound mix. So we basically had to wait for that to finally finish, and then we were able to finish the sound mix post strike. So it's like, I've in a way I've been done on that film for over a year now, and I'm still waiting for it to have its release. So there are a lot of like moments like that where you're sitting there waiting and you're like, okay, is this gonna... I had this like season 2 of Bonding on Netflix. Like we finished that in so the strike, or so not the strike, the quarantine happened, and we were working on that, and it was early March of 2020, and they sent us home, and we finished the shows from home very quickly, and they were like, great, no notes. And I'm sitting around thinking like, nobody's shooting anything, nobody's making anything. Like they're probably going to rush this out, right? No. No, they didn't. They put it out at the end of January of 2021, and just.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, I'm assuming and hoping for you get paid as you do your work. You don't have to be like, okay, well, when this comes out in 2 years, I'm going to have a paycheck.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's basically a lot of the stuff is freelance or it's an independent contractor kind of thing. Gotcha. So yeah, you do get paid weekly, just like you would like on a normal job. And then, at the end of it, you are essentially laid off, and then you go and you find another job.
That's stressful too. I got to believe.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for actors. They're, if you're a feature actor, you don't really maybe even necessarily ever have to do another movie, or you can wait for the perfect thing to come along.
Yeah.
But yeah, you kind of have to be like, okay, I'll do it. what would be really frustrating, and I don't know how, and you may have this written into contracts and stuff. What happens if you're editing show A, whatever it is, doesn't matter, and then someone else comes along and says, "Oh, I need you for this feature film." Then what happens? Do you have someone else come in and take over the
Yeah.
job that you had, or
Yeah, I think more so you find that like if a certain situation comes along, um, you know, sometimes an editor will replace themselves with somebody they trust.
Hmm,
Um, I've definitely had situations where I'm working on something and then something else comes up. Scare Me was one of them. I was
hmm.
working on another movie that's called How to Deter a Robber, which is a lot of fun. It's kind of like Home Alone meets Fargo. And and I was working on that movie, and the director got called into jury duty, and she was
Oh,
like, it's no big deal, I'm going to go in, tell them this, that, and the other, and then we'll be back at it on Wednesday. I was like, okay.
right.
No, she got picked for jury and put on a trial for 3 months.
Oh,
So all of a sudden, she was not available anymore to finish the movie. And coincidentally, I got this email about Scare Me, and Josh Rubin was somebody that I always wanted to work with, and I read the script and it was fantastic. And I was like, I got to figure out how to make this work. And so, since technically we were in a holding pattern on the other movie, I jumped on to doing that movie. And then when the time came, it was just like scheduling myself. So I was like, all right, we'll spend a couple days working on this, and then it's a couple days working on that, and then, whatever. And then, eventually there's always this sort of cross that bridge when we come to it vibe
gotcha.
that I think, because what I have found over the years is that if you spend a lot of time worrying about your schedule lining up perfectly, it never will.
Sure.
And especially post-pandemic and all the sort of weird, the flux that we've been in the
Yeah.
industry, that like there are projects that I've been told were happening. I would easily say there are like 4 or 5 movies that I was supposed to do over the last 3 years, and I haven't done a single one of them. All of the projects I've worked on have all been things that just like came out of nowhere. But all the movies I was supposed to do, all of the movies that I was like told to hold dates for, none of them happened.
That
So
sucks.
yeah. So I've definitely had to learn the hard way to just be like, go with the flow, cross that bridge when we come to it. And then also, yeah, like just situations where, if you're already on a job or you think you're double booked or whatever, it's like almost always, if it's a good opportunity for you, do it and then just figure it out later.
Gotcha.
And then if you have to be like, hey, I'm sorry, this other opportunity came along and I got to replace myself, but
Sorry, I'm going to go play for the Yankees. So I know that Scare Me was kind of a special deal because you didn't have 40 different sets that you had, locations that you had to go shoot at and stuff. But how long did that take? Like from when they said, okay, here's the first meeting to discuss this to when it was ready to roll.
I'd say about 3.5 months, something like
Really?
that. Yeah, I mean, typically they do. I would say on average, a movie takes 12 weeks.
Okay.
It could take a lot longer, obviously.
Sure.
I think like, if you're working on Dune, I think like
Avatar or something.
exactly. Yeah. I think Eddie Hamilton was working on the last Mission Impossible movie for like the last 5 years or something like that. Like it's something crazy. But yeah, like with indies, I think for me, it's a matter of like budget plus time. So I used to take a movie, and if they came to me or whatever, and they were like, we only have X amount of dollars, and I'd be like, great. And then the next thing I know, I'm spending 6 months working on something for 1 month's pay. So it really gets into the world now where it's like, okay, what are you working with? Or this is what I'm asking for. Can you do that? No. Okay. What are you working with? And then taking that budget and then figuring out like, well, what can I give you time wise for that amount of money? So
That's rough, man.
But I would say typically like 12 weeks, because I try to, if it takes them like, 15 or 20 days to shoot a movie, it's going to take me at least 20 to 25, maybe 30 days to do an assembly cut.
Yeah.
So, so like, for instance, this movie I'm working on right now, they shot it in 15 days. So I'm kind of looking at it as like, well, that's going to at least take me 4 weeks to edit, So that's 4 weeks right there. And then you got to get into working with the director, and that could go one or two ways. It could be like, you're in there with the director every single day for 2 months, or, it could be like, hey, they watched the cut. Here's 3 pages worth of notes. And then the next time they come in, they're like, here's 2 pages worth of notes. And then the next day they're like, here's 1 page worth of notes. And then you're like, great, we got it. Now let's show it to some people. You do some test screenings. Then you do notes based on that test screening. You do a couple more, and then it's done. So, I mean, all in all, I would say at least like 3 months on average.
That doesn't sound like as much fun as I hoped it would be. Gotta be honest with you.
It's like a roller coaster, man, because it's like my least favorite part of editing is the assembly, because you're basically given like a blank canvas and say like, make something out of this. I sometimes I equate it to like somebody giving you a puzzle, but it's got a bunch of broken pieces and missing pieces, and you got to figure out how to put it back together. So that's my least favorite part. But then like once it's together and you start showing people, you show the director and like they've got ideas, and then you show other people and like they have thoughts, and then you start like rediscovering footage that you missed originally that like all of a sudden now is like an epiphany.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part of editing. Like when you're like 3 or 4 revisions in, and the movie that you thought you understood is now something completely different.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Ryan, I have taken up a ton of time. Why don't you ask any movie questions that you have?
Oh, I don't have a ton of. I have a ton.
Yes, you
I don't
do.
have any. I don't have a ton on the top of my head that I'm really thinking about. I mean, I guess one of the questions that I'm curious about, just from I'm essentially like a hobbyist. What type of equipment and software do you tend to use? I mean, I know a lot of people can make pretty fantastic stuff using a MacBook and Final Cut, but what do you tend to use, and how much data does that tend to take up? Because I know in editing like an hour of YouTube videos, I've had project files in Final Cut balloon up to 700 gigs just with Final Cut producing proxies and things like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I go back and forth between Premiere Pro and Avid Media Composer. I spend a lot more time in Premiere, and that's just out of personal preference. But like, I think both of them have their pros and cons. And so a lot of the times I put it on production to tell me what they want to do. So, they might say like, well, specifically, like we need somebody to cut this in Avid because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay. So it's good to know, if you're working professionally, it's good to know a little bit of everything, because you never know when you're going to walk in and then somebody's going to go, hey, we're cutting this on Final Cut X. And you're like, what? But more so it's Avid. It's like, I think that this industry is basically an Avid town. So it's, you have to know that, because almost all the jobs are going to be on that, and then sort of fewer with Premiere. But Premiere is one of the things that's like my personal preference. So, if I'll ask somebody and they'll tell me like, oh, I think, it's up to you or whatever, I kind of look at like the quality of the project or the needs of the project as well, because like a movie might have a lot of like graphic needs or visual effects needs or whatever. That's going to be something that I'd rather do in Premiere, because of Creative Cloud. You can basically send files straight to After Effects, do a little work, send it straight back to Premiere, hit save, and it's like boom, right in. David Fincher prefers the Creative Cloud on all of his movies. And so, but if it's something that's like more dialogue driven, I might want to use Avid Media Composer, because they have script sync, and I can basically bring the script in a text form, and then it uses AI to scan the footage and then put the footage where it matches with the script.
That's
As I'm going through, and if I'm in the room with the director and the director goes, I don't like this line. I don't like the way she says I love you. Can you show me every other version of her saying I love you? I can go into Script Sync and find the line, lasso it, and hit play, and it'll go, I love you. I love you. I love you. Like, it'll show every different version of how they did it. And that's a huge time saver.
That's awesome. And speaking of AI, the one thing I was thinking about while you were talking about your least favorite part being trying to figure out like the first pieces of the puzzle. I feel like for me, I mean, AI is a little scary in terms of what the future is going to look like for people whose jobs can be replaced by that. Like, I feel like a paralegal is a type of job that could be maybe not easily replaced by it, but could be greatly augmented by it. But when it comes to Jay and I have used AI to help create, just scripts, different ways of phrasing things. That's how I got started with it, because I owned a bar. And it's like, there's only so many ways I can say, we're having trivia on Thursday. It's like, I'm not going to write it for the 30th time and be like, yeah, trivia again on Thursday. I need to find some other way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
And I feel like AI was really helpful. I'd be like, say it like Donald Trump. Say it like how South Park would think Donald Trump would say it. Like, say it like you're in Always Sunny, something like that. And it would come up with these different things that I could then refine. Do you see, I mean, this is probably maybe not quite crept into the industry so much yet, but do you see AI kind of coming in to help sort of give you an initial skeleton to work with?
No, it already has. And I've been using it in a lot of like sound work. I think that like, I'm not the greatest when it comes to sound mixing, but like there's, certain, in Adobe Creative Cloud, they use, it's called Adobe Sensei, and it is their version of AI, which basically can like analyze audio and clean it up. These are all things that was like, we used to have plugins or EQ and all this stuff that, if something's like really noisy or a car drives by or something, like, well, we can't use that take. We got to go find another one, or we got to do ADR. There's technology now that we can just scan it. You guys might use this. It's Adobe Podcasts, and you can go on there, take a clip of audio, throw it up, and it will clean it up, and then you just download it and throw it right in, and it sounds like it's in a studio. So I've been using stuff like that already for a year. And then I mentioned before, there's generative fill AI now that has become just insanely handy. You can do it in Photoshop, you can do it in After Effects, where if somebody's walking around in the background of a shot, or there's a picture on the wall that you can't get cleared, it's like you just throw it into After Effects, lasso it, and it'll analyze the footage, and it's gone. It's like it never existed. So there's a lot of stuff like that, but I do think that with that, there are some dangers, and there's definitely, I just yesterday had to make a really quick video for something that I did not want to spend time editing on a Sunday. And so I threw it into TikTok, and I took all the footage and threw it into TikTok, and then hit auto cut, and it automatically, chopped up the footage to what it thought were the best moments. And of course I had to go in and like zhuzh it a little bit, but I was like, this took me 10 minutes of what probably would have taken me an hour to edit myself. So I think there are I've seen things that are definitely like very worrisome of where this could go, where basically you could have a prompt to say like, make a commercial that looks like this, and like it'll either find footage from a library, or what was announced yesterday was like
within the last couple days,
where it's like now you can just type in exactly what you want and it'll create it for you. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, what scares me the most is that you're going to have some executive who will say, well, why do we really need writers for this? Do we really need
Well, I have a
this
theory on
role
that.
for that? Because I mean,
Yeah.
it's just none of it's quite the same. I've messed with the major ones that are available online. I've also got like a PC that's barely powerful enough to run LLMs locally, and you can run them locally without some of the safeguards. They can kind of be a little bit more unhinged than the ones that are online who will be like, no, I can't write about this. I can't do impressions, whatever. And it's always very derivative. It's not
Yeah.
particularly original. Sometimes I feel like it's good for a little inspiration or giving you an idea that maybe you didn't have before or a structure to work off of. But I dread the day that somebody puts out an all AI production or an all AI episode of a TV show.
I mean, this is what I'll say about that. That is going to happen. And it will happen because somebody has got to do it in order for everybody else to then say, fuck that.
That's a bad, to say that's a bad idea.
It's like a couple of years ago, there's this movie called Tangerine that was shot on an iPhone. And everybody was like, you could shoot a movie on an iPhone. But guess what? People are not making movies on iPhones. Like, you might shoot a scene on an iPhone. Like, you might be like, hey, I think Top Gun is a great example. Like, they were putting GoPros and iPhones like in the cockpits of the airplanes to make Top Gun Maverick. Like, so, somebody is going to do it. Somebody's going to say, here's a completely AI generated script and we shot the movie. Or they're going to be like, here's an AI generated script with AI actors, AI scenery. It's going to happen. And then people are going to go, yeah, no, we're good. And just like all of media in a circle, they're going to go right back to where they were before. So I think it is inevitable that the thing will happen, but you will never be able to remove the human element because, like you were saying, it's like you can tell I've done this. It's like you could tell, ChatGPT, like, write me an episode of Alf. And all it's doing is it's going through any episode of Alf that it can find on the internet and then recreating words and phrases and action lines and things from already existing stuff. So for it to create something that's wholly original, I don't know. And then somebody's going to have to watch over it. So somebody's going to have to then get that script and then go, okay, yeah, no, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't work. Like, can't do that. Like, it's kind of like when you see the AI generated images and they've got like 7 fingers and you're like, what? It's like there has to be some sort of like overseeing that, like, right, as an editor, if you created a project that was like, here's all this footage, edit this together for me, I would still have to go through that footage and be like, well, that's not right. Can't do that. You can't put these.
That's a lie because they lie sometimes too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They get stuff wrong or they do horrifying things. Like, I ran a version of Dolly on my local PC and I was like, give me a picture of a blonde girl dancing or whatever. And it did it, but it didn't render any arms for her. And it was horrifying. Yeah. It's like, well, I guess I didn't say she had to have arms. It's just so terrifying. She looks like a Picasso painting.
So there's no getting rid of it altogether, but like what we can do is that we can learn to use it as a tool. Because like for me, when I see Sora, I'm like, oh my God. I had a movie just this past fall where like we didn't have a shot of the car going down a desert road. And so then we went to rent the car and the owner of the car was like, you can't take it more than like 5 minutes away. And we're like, so we can't take it to the desert where we can get the shot that we need for the cut. Well, that's awful. So we need to have it drive down a road and then send it to VFX and then have them change the background. But something like Sora, if I can be like, have a pink Cadillac drive down a desert road at dusk away from camera, and it creates that for me, and it's royalty free, it didn't cost a dime to go shoot. Like, that's incredible. That's, or like with music videos or whatever, if like, I'm like, I need a shot overlooking Los Angeles that like then goes into a tunnel or something like that. And like Sora can do that. That's fantastic. Because what's that going to
Yeah.
cost me to go shoot?
Yeah, and I feel like that's the only way to stay ahead. I just had a conversation with somebody from a major tech company, like personally, but they were talking about kind of being a little worried about AI. And I was like, the only way to stay ahead of it is to get to use it. Like, get comfortable with it, know what it can do, figure out how it fits into things.
Yeah. Because eventually it's just going to become part of the workflow. Anybody that's like, I've been telling students for years, which is like, you have to be on top of everything, because the moment that you're not, it's going to steamroll you, and then you're going to become obsolete. And, the people younger than you that are coming out of college that do know how to use these things, they're going to be the ones getting the jobs. So yeah, any sort of new tech that comes in, like, you have to like learn it, adapt it, figure out how it works for you, but in terms of like it being a much bigger thing, like, will we go to a theater and see, like Avatar? Like, could we see Avatar completely AI? Sure. Do I want to go spend money on that? No. But like, will somebody do it? I'm sure they will.
Yeah, I'm worried about a world where it's mostly AI, and then you have kind of like you have non-GMO foods where you have to go to Whole Foods or like a specialty place. Like, I don't want to go have to seek out human created art.
But it's just like I'm saying with music, right? It's like you could listen to an album digitally, but like, what have humans done? They've gone back to listening to it on vinyl.
Yeah. Yeah, I have hundreds of records on a shelf back here. I mean, and I don't know. It's just a totally different experience. There's like a ritual to it I've learned to appreciate. Like, pour a drink, put the record on, brush it, put the needle down, like, sit down and relax, as opposed to throwing my AirPods and tell Siri what I want to listen to and just kind of sit there or walk around or grocery shop or whatever else. It's a different experience.
I'm sure your viewers are probably going like, when are these guys going to talk about cryptids or something?
Yeah, both of them. So, that seems, Ryan, do you have any other movie-related questions? Because this seems like a good time to transition into his other talent.
Oh, hi.
Aha, y'all didn't know. You thought we were coming with one talent tonight, but no, there's two. So, moving on. You might be happy to know that at work today, I played some Occults and I played some Nothing Still. It went over really well, and everybody was dancing to Magnum Girl. Tell us about the beginning with Nothing Still, how it started. I know, Emilio's a big part of that, and he's, moved on with you. But tell us about the beginnings of Nothing Still.
Well, yeah, I'll try to tell this in a way that encompasses both projects, but
okay.
I think that like when I was a teenager, and I was really into nu metal, the funny thing was all this nu metal music was actually born out of a combination of like 80s hair metal, rap, and new wave music, and specifically, like post-punk, new wave, shoegaze. And so bands like Deftones that we were loving in, the late 90s, early 2000s were very heavily influenced by bands like The Cure and Depeche Mode and the Smiths. And so I sort of naturally gravitated from one thing to the other, and I wanted to make something that was, electronic but high energy. I also really loved Prince and the Revolution. So I wanted to have a band that was like that. And so out of that, I created the band Nothing Still. And so we did our thing. And I always joke that we were like the Killers before the Killers happened, because I very specifically remember being in a radio station doing an interview with Nothing Still, and the DJ at the radio station was like, "Is there anything you want to play?" And we were like, No, play whatever. And they were like, "Have you heard this new song by the Killers?" And she put on Somebody Told Me, their first single, and we were all sitting there like, "Are you serious?" Like, they beat us to it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it just never really took off. And years later, Emilio, the lead singer of Nothing Still, and I we kind of reunited around 2018, and the technology had changed, just like with film, the technology had changed, and we were now able to do things for a fraction of the cost of what we would have done in the 2000s, and do it remotely. And so even though I was living in Los Angeles and everybody else was living in Missouri, we started writing a new album. And Emilio, the lead singer, he kind of started finding his love of music again, because he had sold off all of his equipment. He was like, he had DJ'd for a couple of years and like just wasn't really doing much. And so, you know, he started picking up a guitar again and, you know, playing with, you know, recording software, and realizing all the things that I knew, which was that like you didn't need, you know, amps and, you know, all these, you know, pedals and everything to like do these things, or like go to a studio and spend thousands of dollars recording. Like you could do all this at home. And he started demoing music that was the type of music that like he and I loved when we were 17 or 18 years old. And I was like, I love that. I want to do something with that. It doesn't work for nothing still. So what do we do with it? And so that's how the Occults project was born. And this was all happening sort of like we were writing this album around 2019-ish. And it was taking longer than we had hoped. And quarantine happened. So we were in quarantine writing all this music. And so our approach with Occults was, we want to make the music we've always wanted to make, and we're going to put it out, and we don't care if anybody listens to it, because as long as it's something that we're happy with. Because we would be like, we would joke and we would say that like, you know, the last Nothing Still record, like I could really only listen to like half of it. So, so we were like, we're only going to put out music that like we absolutely love and that we're proud of. And so we did. And what we found in return was that people found it. Found it, and they were listening to it, and, you know, and not just locally, on a worldwide level. And so we've now been doing Occults for going on 3 years now. And, you know, we just had a record label in Germany called Summer Darling Tapes. They licensed our first EP, Sacred Heart, and put that out on cassette, and it sold out.
That's awesome.
And that's based in Germany. So it was an EU exclusive cassette. And then
I bet that's worth something now. I have to check that out on eBay.
Hell yeah. And then we've got another, we're writing a full-length album currently that like we weren't planning on doing, but like was sort of a similar situation with another label that wanted to do a vinyl release. And so it made us like reconsider what we were doing. So we like changed course, and we were doing single-based releases. And so we were like, well, yeah, we could write an album. Sure. You know? So, so we're in the process of finishing that up now as well. But
that's amazing.
Yeah, I
Good
think
for
that,
you guys, man.
Yeah, I think, and that's the funny thing is that we love it. And it really fulfills the soul, because, you know, you were asking me earlier about like what I bring to something creatively. And it's like a lot of times in the film world, I am being creative for other people. And, you know,
that's self-expression.
Yeah. They get all the glory, you know? And so, and so with Occults, it's very much that like we can create music for ourselves. And if people find it, they find it. And if they don't, they don't. And it's fine, you know? Of course, I would love it if everybody found it and we were the biggest band in the world, but like, it just doesn't work out that way. But yeah, I think we've taken advantage of not just thinking small, but thinking large, and like thinking globally. And this, you know, we sell merchandise, you know, to Australia, Germany. I've sold stuff up to other parts of Europe, Brazil, cool. And it's just wild, you know, of course, America, but, you know, and we just try to find new outlets for it and try to see, you know, but I think the most difficult thing is that now we were in the social media world Whereas like we used to go and go, hand out flyers at a show, go to the mall and play our CD for people, and they buy tickets and and now it's like you're making content, putting it out, and then hoping the algorithm lets 100 people see it.
Yeah. Oh, I hate social media. I mean, we have to do it too, but it's what I dread most. It's
Oh
just
yeah, I hate it.
awful.
Yeah, I had made some content this weekend, and really good stuff. And I had to reach out to a couple like social media pages and throw them a couple bucks to like, these are pages with like large followings to post it.
Right.
And we got like 15 new followers off of it, and then I posted on my page and it gets like 60 likes or something, it's like, but it's nothing that we're doing. It's just that the algorithm decides that like, if it doesn't get 20 likes in the first 5 minutes, then people must not be interested in this. And so we're not going to show it to anybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a struggle. And then at the same time, you're watching other bands doing, worse quality music, who are like getting a lot more attention because they're better at social media than you are. It's really frustrating.
But, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, go.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, like you look at the state of music as it is, you really, I mean, we talk about doing research and it's like, you can't just go to page 1 of Google, and it's the same thing with music. You can't just like, see what's hot on Google top 100 or whatever and find decent stuff. You have to dig deep for it. And someone like Takeshi 669 or 6x9, whatever he is, he was like a social media wizard, and his music was I couldn't stand it. I mean, it was like something they could torture you with to get secrets. And this dude, we all know he ratted and all that, but he blew up with horrible music and great social media skills. And that's a sad state that I think music is in now. I mean, is there anybody that's, maybe the last year or two that's popped up that you're just like, man, I really love this. These guys have a big future.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what I love about our genre is that it's not mainstream, but yet within the genre, it might as well be mainstream. There are, specifically there's a band called Twin Tribes that are these two Mexican American guys from South Texas, and they are making some of the best dark wave goth music you've heard in like 40 years. And they're doing it all themselves. They're not signed to a label. They self-promote, and they're like, currently they just released an album about 3 weeks ago, and they were touring down the West Coast here and selling out theaters. And they've got no label support behind them at all. It's all just word of mouth and like the Latin American community. And like those guys are really doing it big. There's another band that's fantastic called Urban Heat. It's also from Texas, that is mixing post-punk with very sort of like, I wouldn't say hip hop, but like very sort of like urban vibes to it that like is cool and it's fresh. And I think our angle of it all is that we, like I said, like we want to make the music that like we loved when we were a kid, but we're not necessarily out to fill a quota or like make an agenda. It's for us, it's like making music that like when we hear it, we're just like, that sounds like The Cure. That sounds like Depeche Mode. That sounds like the Smiths. And cool. And I think that we figured out like our first EP, Sacred Heart, was like a little bit more post-punk because that was the direction we thought we wanted to go in. But then when we started noticing on social media and Spotify that people were gravitating towards certain songs, we started finding our way into this more dark wave, gloom gaze, as we call it, form of music, where, it's just, we sort of like, as Occults, what we do, because Emilio's married, he's got 2 kids, I'm married, I work a full-time job as a film editor. It's like we sort of know that's like, hey, we're not out there like hiding in the shadows, like drinking people's blood or anything like that.
Sure.
But what we can do is like we've kind of created these like uber goth characters within Occults that sing about darkness, but it's all rooted in things that are very much real, but we might over exaggerate on a few lyrical elements.
Well, of course. Well, I mean, everybody has to exaggerate a little bit for it to be fun. I mean, you look at the gangster rappers out there. How many of them do you think are really gangsters? But I do love the Occults videos are amazing. Do you shoot those videos? Is that all you, or I mean, I'm sure Emilio helps, but
actually, so when Emilio was living in St. Louis, he's currently in Denver.
okay.
But when he was in St. Louis, we were working with this guy Juan Ibanez, JT Ibanez, out of St. Louis. And so what was great was Juan was a buddy and has his own studio and set up. And so I knew that it was like we can't go above and beyond because we don't have like a huge budget to work with, but like what we can do is create content that works for what we need it to. And so Juan was great because we were able to do that. When we made the song Hot Crucible, we made this music video where we were burned alive at the stake. And this is like literally an idea that came to me as I was leaving the gym and I was listening to the song and I was just imagining Emilio and I tied together, set on fire. And I didn't know how I would do it. You know, but I reached out to Juan Ibanez and he had an LED wall in his studio. And so I pitched this idea to him where I was like, can we, if Emilio and I are tied together in front of this LED wall and then we backlight it with flames and then we front light it with, you know, flame lighting, then I, as a film editor, I know that I could comp in real flames on top of that with smoke elements and all the things and make it look like we were really set on fire. And so that video was a lot of fun to make. And I had, we had my cousin helped out and we had a bottle of glycerin and water for sweat. And between takes, he's just spraying both of us in the face with glycerin. So that way it looks like we're like drenched in sweat. There's no actual flames and we're just like, ah.
That's good stuff.
So that was a lot of fun.
I want to know who killed the horse in the video. Patrick?
Oh, in the Sacred Heart video.
Yeah.
Okay,
who was
so that's
responsible for that? I did not see anything that said no animals were harmed in the making of this video.
Yeah, so
I hope you ate it.
That's actually so previously before editing, I was directing music videos and I directed a video for this band called Fire the Animal. And they no longer exist anymore. But we shot this music video out in way out in the desert outside of Los Angeles and Lancaster, California. And while we were walking through the desert, we were there was like this patch of land that we were just walking across, like trying to get a shot.
Right.
And we like turned to the left and then there was just this horse just like dead. And
That's
it was
crazy.
like, and it's like carcass and just like completely hollowed out. Like, I don't know like what got to it, if it was like coyotes or it was a bird, but it was like literally just it was as if the horse had just fallen over vertically and then just like something came and just like ate out all of its insides or whatever.
That's crazy.
And so we shot footage of the horse for that video. And so when I was making the Sacred Heart video, I was like, I got to go and find that footage because I knew we had a couple different shots of it.
Sure.
So I reused the same shot from that video.
Okay, good. So no horses.
No, that's just called in the film industry we call that a three-legged dog, which is like if you're shooting something and you see a three-legged dog walk by, you film it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. You can always tell that footage. There's always some weirdo out there looking for a three-legged dog video.
Yeah, so if you're in the desert and there's just a dead horse carcass, like you film it. Like
that's right.
Of course.
All right. So are you guys going to be playing any shows anywhere? I mean, of our limited listeners, they really are all over the world. But are you guys going to be? I mean, do you play shows in LA? Do you get together much? How does that work?
See, we're hoping to, like I said, when we got started, it was very much just, for fun, but
Hmm.
now it's grown into a much bigger thing. And so like we've gotten a couple offers, but they haven't been for anything that like was really substantial. But I think that like, because we're doing this album and that we're gonna have to probably put like a little bit of promotion behind it, we're hoping to. I mean, I think we would love to do it. There's what's great about the goth and dark wave community is that there's all these like event kind of shows around the
Sure. Yeah.
country, like
Festival type.
festival type stuff, yeah, but also like smaller scale, larger scale. There's goth proms that happen all around the country.
That's
That
cool.
so we're kind of hoping that we can start tapping into a few of those, like once we're done with this album, and we want to start kind of leaning in that direction, but not gigging. Like that's like the last thing we want to do is go back to like playing 3 or 4 shows a month. We don't want to
Sure.
do that.
Well, it seems like the way to make money. I mean, if you're, you know, not so good on social media, we'll say, in music, it seems like touring is how people make their money
Mhm.
because, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do. Your song's going to be on YouTube. You know what I mean? And you can, they can run it through algorithms and stuff like that, but it's always going to be out there. But the live show, and I think you guys, I mean, I've seen you guys nothing still a couple times live. I thought you guys were great, and I think that maybe I mean, is that something that you would welcome, like touring?
I think on a certain scale, yeah. And we've talked about. I think there's opportunities to do stuff where like it's like a long weekend or something where a lot of
Sure.
bands are doing these routes where it's like San Diego, Los Angeles, the Bay Area,
Yeah,
Portland,
yeah,
Seattle, and like that's a tour. So it's
yeah.
like I think we're more open to doing something like that instead of doing like more of like a nationwide thing. But then at the same time, like I said, it's like we completely sold out of a release in Germany. So
Yeah.
if all of a sudden like a promoter from Germany calls and is like, I want you on this festival show, we're probably going to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. That's funny. I mean, we have like, a couple listeners where I've had to be like, "Where is this place? I've never heard of it." And I'm like, "How did you hear about us on some island in the Mediterranean, but we can't get people in St. Louis to listen?"
Yeah. They've got cryptids on the island and they're hoping that you can help them figure it out.
I'm telling you, man. So one story I wanted to get to, I was hoping Ryan would be here. I don't know. He said he had to dip out for a minute, but I guess we'll have to do it without him. Is one of the first things that we did, and I believe we were at FYE, is go hunt down the Gibson vampire. You remember that?
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, we went. I believe it's in like Vallis Minis or Valley Mines, however you say it, but
Uh-huh.
it's about an hour maybe south of St. Louis, and yeah, we didn't have GPS
Yes.
or anything.
Yeah,
We
I
just
do remember
walked.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did an episode on the Gibson vampire. So it's kind of cool, reliving those days. And we found the grave with the little bent over fence, and I don't think there was a vampire there, but I don't know. You
Might
see
be.
anything? You see anything?
Yeah, I completely forgot that we did that. I remember that now that we found that little tiny cemetery sort of like
Yeah.
off the road. Yeah, that was
Yeah, we were
wild.
worried people were going to come out and shoot us because it was like kind of in people's like side yard, like maybe I don't know, 500 yards away from a house, and we're like watching our backs, and yeah,
Yeah.
nothing
It's
came
creepy.
of it, but you know,
There's places like that out here in
I
California. Like
bet.
if you go far enough out into the desert, like I mean, there are just places where it's like I can imagine you would bury somebody and never find them
Oh,
ever.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Did you ever stay at the Limp Mansion?
Oh yeah.
You ever have any experiences there?
100%.
Oh, tell us about that. See, now we're getting to it. Rewarding the people that stuck around.
Yeah. Now we're getting to the ghost story. So yeah, no, I'm an avid ghost fan, and I think that um, whenever I get into conversations with people that are very just like they don't believe in the afterlife, stuff. You know, I've got a few things that are in my back pocket, but like,
All
but
right.
the craziest thing that I ever experienced, it happened at the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis. But my cousin had gotten married, and the reception was at the Lemp Mansion, and that night they rented 2 rooms, and the maid of honor had passed out in one of the rooms, and so it was it was the Charles Lemp suite, and so there are 2 rooms, there are 2 rooms in the suite, I should say. So there's like a drawing room, and then there's like the bedroom, and there's a sliding divider door between the 2 of them.
Okay.
So she passed out in the bed, and my cousin and I thought it would be funny to try scaring her. And so we each grabbed one side of the sliding doors, and we slammed them together, and it was loud. It was like a gunshot went off.
You didn't expect it to be that loud?
No, but I was like 2 solid wood doors, right? Just smacked together. Okay. And it was like a gunshot went off, and we're both holding the doors closed, and we're giggling, we're laughing, and the doors start shaking from the other side, like they're trying to open. And we're holding them as hard as we can. We're trying to hold these 2 doors together. So, and then they stop, and we waited a couple seconds, and then we're like, all right, she's done. We open it back up. She hadn't moved. She was still completely passed out, sound asleep.
Wow.
And he and I looked at each other, and we were just like, what the hell was that? And like, to this day, I cannot explain it. But the thing I know more than anything is that, like, when something happens and like it is 100% real, there's to me, there was like no other explanation than somebody was trying to open that door on the other side. And then there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am a firm believer. And then the other really spooky that gives me the heebie-jeebies. My wife, her family is kind of highly attuned to the spirit world.
Cool.
And so our nephew at the time was like a year and a half old or whatever, and they were having like Thanksgiving, and he was upstairs by himself, like playing with some toys or whatever, and came downstairs in the middle of this family gathering and said, "Mom, Aunt Grace is upstairs. She wants to speak with you." Okay. And Aunt Grace had been dead for a couple years.
Wow. I think little kids can see stuff, man. I think that they can, they haven't been beat down and told it's all in your head. So I think, kids and animals can see that kind of stuff, but that is pretty scary, man.
That one, it gives me the chills even as I'm telling it to you. Like, it's
from being such a tiny kid saying it too. You couldn't take like a 1-year-old and be like, "Hey, we're going to play a prank. You need to," you know what I mean? They're not going to do that. So, and then hearing it in a creepy little baby voice would be even worse. Oh, so anything else in Limp or anywhere else that you've had any
spooky? No, I've been very not. I did have another thing. This is kind of stupid, but one of the first apartments that I moved into here in Los Angeles, the address was 666, which was like part of the appeal of moving there. And
you need a picture of that for one of your videos.
I know. But when we moved in, the owner told us that some old woman had previously lived in the apartment and had passed. So we were just like, okay, whatever. But there were 2 instances. One, we were watching TV, and we had these like Ouija board shot glasses, like something you would get at like Spencer's or like Spirit Halloween. We had them like lined up on the we had like an IKEA shelf that the TV sat on, and we were just like sitting there watching Netflix one day, and one of the shot glasses went like off of the thing and hit and smashed.
Completely off? Wow.
Yeah. And my wife and I just jumped up, like, what the hell? What was that? And I turned back and looked at her, and she was like, "Did you see what I saw?" And I was like, "Yeah." It was like the thing went, like it didn't fall off.
Right. Yeah, it had distance.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary because if it can do that, it could probably scratch you. It could probably, well, it could definitely like hide your keys and do annoying stuff. But
Yeah. And then the other weird thing that happened at that apartment that I can't explain, and this is more like it could have been just faulty shit, but like
sure.
it was the timing of it that was really weird. Was that we had like a hanging terrarium, like a glass terrarium thing that was hanging in the living room, and my wife did something stupid, and I was like, "That's it, we're done, we're breaking up, you know." We're not getting married, and like in the middle of us, like, you know, we were play fighting with each other, but we're like yelling, and in the middle of this, the terrarium just drops and hits the floor and shatters.
Damn.
And we were just like,
did you get out after that? I'd
no,
probably.
The old woman's name was Miss Freeze, and so we're we're sorry, Miss Freeze, we're just joking, we're just playing around. But it was like it was weird. The timing of it was so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like she doesn't like drinking and she doesn't like fighting.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, you know.
Well, that was the other thing too, was that the Ouija glass, the one she broke, it had like a Ouija board printed on it. So like you would like a flat Ouija board, it was like printed on the glass. So it was almost like she didn't like Ouija boards. Like, yeah, it was something weird.
So when you played with the Ouija board later that night, what happened?
Get out. Yeah, no, those are I think my big ones. Those are like the things that I cannot explain, and I always go to, like, that's just weird.
Well, it happens. So I have an email out to Jim Cornette. Pretty sure he's not going to email me back. Would you be
Jim Cornette, the wrestling manager?
The Jim Cornette, yes. I want to do an episode on the dark side of the ring. Would you want to come back and do an episode on that?
I might just to come back and listen, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've seen it.
I've seen Dark Side of the Ring. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty wild, man.
Yeah. Have you seen the Iron Claw?
No, but I saw it was suggested for me. So
yeah,
you should watch it in the next couple days here.
Heart-wrenching.
But man, like Bruiser Brody, he used to fight at Wrestling at the Chase. I mean, that's almost before my time, so it's probably a little bit before your time. But yeah, like Harley Race and Bruiser Brody and guys like that, they used to all wrestle in St. Louis. And I don't know, some weird stuff went on with. I mean, it's almost like everybody is fucked up, right? Every ex-wrestler.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I mean, one of our clients, Randy Orton, is his brother-in-law. Mm-hmm. So he's come in and hung out with the group and stuff like that. He seems to be a pretty nice guy, but I don't know, man. It seems like a curse. But you want to tell us the story about going through your dad's old photos and what you found? Let me give you a hint. If it'll show up on camera.
Oh, Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I know the story you're talking about. Yeah. We were wasn't my dad. It was in Nothing Still, our guitarist.
Oh, okay.
Anthony, his dad used to play a lot of shows. And down in sort of like southern Missouri area or whatever, and they used to have shows, and they would just like put up like a flatbed trailer and like set up their instruments and just play, and like people would just show up and come out and drink or whatever. And so he was like showing us photos, and I'm flipping through the photos, and there's this guy with like long, stark white hair. And just as a joke, I'm like, oh, Rod, you didn't tell me Ric Flair was at your shows. And he goes, oh yeah, he used to come out. And I turn to the next photo, and sure as shit, it's Ric Flair.
That's crazy. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Where can people? First of all, run through some movies that you want people to take a look at, and
Oh
tell us
yeah.
where they can find them.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the stuff I worked on, they're independent features, so they are available through Amazon Prime or Apple Movies from video on demand services. Scare Me, the three that I would definitely check out if you have a Shudder subscription. I would check out Scare Me, Who Invited Them, and Blood Relatives, which is a fun. I didn't talk about that earlier, but it's a fun horror comedy about a vampire father and daughter on a road trip together. It was a lot of fun to work on.
That's cool.
And then Clara's Ghost is another one. I'm pretty sure you can watch that on Amazon Prime. It stars the entire Elliott family, Chris Elliott, Abby Elliott, who was just nominated for a Golden Globe, and it was directed by my good friend Bridie Elliott. And then I've got I said like Netflix. There's a show called Bonding that I worked on, which is easily accessible. You can watch that anytime. And then I've got Shelby Oaks, directed by Chris Stuckman, hopefully coming out this year. And just trying to survive out here.
I hear you. Where do you want them to go to buy Occults merchandise?
Oh yeah, go to occultsofficial.com, which will send you directly to our Bandcamp page, and you can buy. We got CDs, cassettes, digital files for if you want your music digital, and then also you can order T-shirts, hats, all kinds of stuff. We got a ton of merchandise, and you just go to bandcamp.com and search for Occults.
All right, that sounds great. I really appreciate your time, Ryan. Do you have any follow-up questions you want to ask?
No, I apologize for bailing on the last quarter of that. We had, I have a very young daughter. There was a bathroom-related emergency.
Oh no!
Don't want to talk about it, but it was really awesome talking to you about movies, and it's funny that I use Chris Stuckman as an example of a new director, and you happen to direct.
I love that. That's kismet. Like, it's absolutely, yeah. Keep an eye out for that movie. It's gonna be really good.
Okay, we like to wrap up our shows with a quote. So you want to tell us your favorite quote from Ghostbusters?
Oh man, I've got a few.
All
for the Cryptid podcast, if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
Good.
That is good.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We had a lot of fun, and I appreciate the over 2 hours you gave us. Time's one of the best gifts you can give anyone, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.